What's that? A Megaman XA Demake? That sounds like a bit of me. Hey, what? Huh? Oh, very funny. Roll the video. I'm a massive Mega Man fan. Mega Man 2 on the NES was one of my first games I ever played. I was hooked on it in my younger days, though I could never get past the Boom Boom Trap boss. Then years later a friend lent me Mega Man X for the SNES, which completely blew me away. The Electric Rock soundtrack, the visuals, the upgrades and dashing. I love dashing around and jumping up the walls. The X series is by far my favourite of the entire franchise, and it's gutting to realise that the last true entry in the series, X8, came out in 2004. But as usual, where a publisher drops the ball and ignores a beloved franchise, fans take the spot, and one of the most anticipated of these fan games is Mega Man X Corruption. But only God knows when that will release. However, one day while perusing YouTube, one of the channels I subbed to uploaded a video entitled Mega Man X8 Demake 100% No Damage, uploaded by X Maverick Hunter, someone who makes Mega Man X No Damage runs look like a stroll in the park. Created by sprite artist and now indie dev Alison DePaz, comes a fully playable demake of Mega Man X8, though there are some limitations, such as only X is playable, the R&D and shop isn't available and therefore no medals. The two auto-scroller levels have been turned into conventional levels that utilise the hoverbike seen in X2, not a bad thing. And once you defeat the 8 Mavericks, it's pretty much the end right there. Whilst there are a certain amount of reused assets in the demake, there is plenty of original material, beautifully animated. The bosses themselves are the real showcase of animation and impeccable sprite artwork. Every now and again you'll see sprite work that looks a bit out of place, not that they're bad looking, they just don't fit in with the general aesthetic, but that's a minor critique. So anyway, I stopped watching, booted up the Steam Deck, headed straight to Sonic Fangames HQ and grabbed myself a download. Absurdly easy to install and boot up on the Steam Deck, a bonus. Configured some controls and away I went. Inspired by Capcom, flashes on the screen and then the music roars up. The title appears and then X himself by the menu, just like the classic games. I'm struck right in the nostalgicals. A quick tweak of the controls and it's game start. X beams down, blasts off the surcharge and we're in. This feels great, it cannot be understated how perfectly replicated the handling of the SNES trilogy is in the demake. It feels spot on, and just a brief admission, I replayed X8 on the Legacy Collection recently, and the demake feels so much better to play. The 3DX games didn't do a good job of fine tuning the controls, and the original X8 feels floaty, loose and imprecise. The demake looks the part and plays it, and that's one thing I will champion about this, and that is perhaps the biggest praise you can give any fan game. So I've covered feel, looks and tone, but sound design is spot on as well. A lot of sound effects from the SNES trilogy and some new ones as well for the bosses and environments. The polish is so good you could believe it was a new X game made by Capcom back in the 90s. The soundtrack is ripped straight out of the original X game, but to be brutally honest, the soundtrack is the best aspect of the original. The intro level plays very well, and something you'll notice in the video is that a lot of original level geometry and enemy placements remain intact. Certain functions may not be there, and none of the enemies that Axel can copy abilities from appear in the demake to my knowledge, but the original levels have been largely faithfully recreated. The intro boss is the crab Reploid that is seen several times in the original. Seeing this thing in motion should immediately tell you the level of skill Alison DePaz has for sprite work. It looks better than the 3D model in the original. Anyway, it's a simple fight with highly telegraphed attacks, and the projectiles are slow enough, not challenging at all, and not much preparation for what's to come. After finishing the intro, I went straight into Optic Sunflower's stage. In the original, it's a series of combat challenges with a time limit. Depending on how well you did, you either progress to a low, mid or high rank. Getting into the higher ranks earns you rewards. In the demake there are no challenge rooms. It's a linear level split into sections that you get graded on. The grading starts with the first enemy you take out and ticks down from there. Grading starts at D and works all the way up to S, but fortunately you only need an A rank to obtain each subsequent reward, which is very manageable with some boss weapons. This level is generally entirely new, but there are a few sections that replicate the original's intermediary platforming sections. It's a good revision that reflects the gimmick of the original whilst bringing it in line with the typical SNES era X level. The next level I tried was Gigavolt Man of War stage, one of the two rebuilt stages. The original was an on-the-rails chase where you had to collect booster consumables and dodge sides to catch up with Man of War. It was a horrible level, badly implemented with rough controls, poor hit detection and was just abysmal. Though, to be fair, I wasn't blown away by this original level in the demake. It's far more palatable, but it's very difficult to see what's incoming, and near the end of the level is its only pitfall that I didn't expect until it was too late. Unlike the previous level, I did reach Man of War, and my god was it a tough fight. I told you the intro boss didn't prepare you for this. The 8 Mavericks have had a massive overhaul when it comes to their battles. They're much more aggressive and varied with their attacks. The overdrive phases are more deadly than before. There is definitely a modern sensibility with the bosses. I'm reminded of Dark Souls and Sekiro, where it feels like there is a much tighter margin for error, but on the flip side the battles are more invigorating. After my defeat, I tried Earthrock Trilobite stage, and a big change here is that the pursuing giant Maverick moves really fast. It speeds up when off screen, and its drill attack covers half the screen. This is one change I wasn't super thrilled with, as it's far easier to outpace in the original. Fortunately for me, however, the Reploid struck a section of wall at the end that I noticed broke apart. Just past it, when you finally evaded, I recognised the fire canisters from the first X game, though I did not have a fire attack. Fortunately, the hole the Reploid broke open leads to the same place, and I unlocked a new body armour that reduces damage by 50%, which is a massive help as the Demake can be pretty brutal with the damage output, and health drops aren't especially common. So I finally got to Trilobite himself, but even with my defensive armour I just couldn't outmaneuver all his attacks. Some of his attacks, such as the rising pillars, have strange hitboxes and you can get hit even when you can see the 2 sprites are not touching. Coupled with their overdrive phase and having to knock its armour off, I just couldn't keep the pressure on and I was met with failure again. Now anyone who has experience with a Megaman game will understand that the very beginning is the hardest part. You have to try every level, find some upgrades, and test out the bosses to see which is the one you'll have the best chance of defeating with your basic weapons. For me, the first bit of headway was Gravity Antonian. The Demake version of this level is a lot easier than the originals. For one thing, it's much shorter, and doesn't feel as confined as the original. We also don't have the annoying crushing spike block room to contend with either. I did end up fighting Vile in this stage, who very nearly took me out as I was learning his pattern. Right after this is a room I missed the secret exit on my first try, but desperate for more upgrades I retried it and was rewarded with a helmet that releases a damaging wave above X as he jumps, which I found incredibly useful. I was feeling pretty confident going into the fight with Antonian, and for good reason. They're not nearly as mobile as other bosses, and although the arena is small and the attacks are pretty predictable, I lost on my first try. But on the next round the warm-up proved most useful as Antonian went down. My first boss down, unlocking me the Gravity Whale weapon, something I found to be pretty useful against regular enemies. It doesn't have the best range but does amazing damage to anything caught in its path. Now to find a Maverick weak to it, I decided I wouldn't spoil this part of the game for myself, and so did a bit of deductive thinking. Assuming that a gravity attack would do the greatest damage against a large foe, I rounded on Bamboo Pandemonium. Booster Forest's faithful recreation in the Demake, and best of all the ride armour appears fully functional, handling just like the armours in X3. It was like slipping on an old glove. The downside I had though was I didn't realise you couldn't take it through the first doorway. Punching the door allows you to carry it through to the subsequent areas, where it's required to obtain the level's upgrades. There is no real indication for this, and I admit I had to watch X-Maverick Hunter's no damage run to see how. Anyway, in this room I had my second fight with Vile and thought I'd use the gravity gun, but this was very much a mistake as it appeared Vile took reduced damage from it and took me out. I turned tack at this point and tried Avalanche Yeti stage. Previously on rails, now turned into a hoverbike level. Unlike Man of War stage, Yeti's is mainly on one level. It's the less convoluted of the two, and I was surprised to see the mini-boss make an appearance in a satisfying battle across the ice. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, my recording corrupted, and I've lost most of this level and the boss fight. All I can say is that Yeti, like Antonian, is not particularly fast and has very predictable attacks, and so I claim my second Maverick victory. With this victory and a new weapon, I had a good idea which foe I could use it against, but before doing so I really wanted to get some more upgrades, so I did a bit of hunting and returned to Pandemonium stage where I collected the very useful foot parts too, that allow X to double jump and double air dash, which really opens things up for exploration, as well as providing a greater amount of mobility in boss fights. The proof, as they say, is in the pudding, as Bamboo Pandemonium would be the next Maverick to go down. I would say I got lucky in winning this fight, as for the longest time they just hung back at one end of the arena firing missiles, and as long as I stood at the opposite end, none of its attacks could harm me. Turns out Pandemonium's weapon, the B-Launcher, is really useful, but more on that later. I returned to Optic Sunflower stage with my enhanced mobility and new weaponry. I decided to have a go at getting some S ranks, but I could only manage A ranks. Fortunately, S are for bragging rights, and so I was able to collect everything including a Buster upgrade, then unlocked Weapon Charge level 3. At this point I'm over the initial hurdle being so under-equipped, and the battle with Optic Sunflower ends up being little in the way of difficulty. The second phase of this fight is easier than the first, as Optic just teleports to your location trying to do touch damage, all whilst a homing laser tracks you, but it's fairly easy to avoid. I also switched to the B launcher, which Optic is weak to, and the fight was soon over. Feeling confident, I returned to Man of War stage, collected the upgrades and went into the battle assured of myself, but Man of War's overdrive gave me too much trouble. The lightning bolt's trajectory is indicated by a brief flash on the floor, but after the first couple they hit the ground multiple times in one burst, and it's at this point I struggle to keep up. Trying to hang off the edge of the map doesn't help either, and the damage you receive from the bolts is pretty severe. After suffering defeat, I headed to Trilobite stage for a rematch, where I learned that the B launcher can destroy spikes, very helpful as it allowed me to collect another energy tank. Trilobite was no match for the B launcher. Whilst not inherently weak to it, it does about the same damage as a stage 1 buster shot, and Trilobite has really short iframes, so a barrage of shells melts their life bar and another Maverick is in the bag. I decided to try Dark Mantis next. The stage was a breeze. I'm so overpowered now that I can just bully my way through the level, but Dark Mantis wasn't so happy to be a walkover. Mantis is very quick and large too. Its attacks cover quite a bit of ground. In between trying to work out its weakness, I was quickly dispatched. I did work out that they're weak to the C shield and was able to get to the second stage, but this is where Mantis finished me off. It has a hugely damaging attack that covers one half of the screen at any one time. I was supposed to dash from one side to the other, but I messed up the timings and ended up dashing into the wrong side. Tail between my legs, I headed to Burn Rooster's level, sure that the ice weapon would see this battle done and dusted. I charged through the level and picked up another upgrade, up a spike section that has no match for my favourite, the B launcher. The boots H grant X iframes while dashing on the ground, which is a pretty powerful upgrade. Sure, I'm sacrificing mobility, but in a boss fight the opportunity for iframes couldn't be passed up. If it wasn't for the boots H, I never would have beaten Rooster. This was a sloppy fight and I really just bullied my way through and the boots covered for my sloppiness. The ice attack does do huge damage, but Rooster gets a lot of iframes in between attacks. They're also a very nimble fighter, capable of moving around the arena fast. Definitely could have had a neater fight if I played it more cautious, but a win is a win. Seeing how useful the boots are in a boss fight, I decided to take on Man of War again, who at this point has been my Moby Dick. I barreled my way to the boss fight and decided the first port of call was to see what they're weak to, but unfortunately none of my weapons did any noticeably greater damage, and too much experimentation had dwindled my health reserves. I settled to use charge shots from the Buster on my next attempt, and it certainly did better than anything else. Man of War doesn't have many iframes, so you can rack up damage pretty fast with consecutive stage 1 blasts. My plan to dash through lightning strikes ended up being a colossal failure, though this time I survived the phase with a single point of energy. Realising my shortcomings in this fight, I relented and used an energy tank. After its overdrive, Man of War returns to its previous skill set and is easily finished off. 7 down, 1 to go. I set up X's armour to the combo I thought would work best and once again onto the breach once more. I'd realised that Dark Mantis is weak to C-Shield, but the counter beams only proc when struck, so I was forced to use the stage 3 homing beam which consumes weapon energy with my current setup. Things started fine, but I took one hit from Mantis' overdrive and was taken from just over half health to one segment. At the same moment, the homing beam hit Mantis and knocked it out of the overdrive. Seizing the chance, I used another E-tank and finished the battle. And that's it, the Demake is finished. All the Mavericks are done. Now, Alice and DePaz said they didn't make the end levels, but I saw Jacob's Ladder appear to the left of the level select. Curious, I selected it, but it's not a stage, it's an all-out battle against all 8 Mavericks in one arena. Needless to say, I was torn apart like a lamb to the slaughter. I had a few goes and wondered just how close I could get to defeating any one of them. First thing I did was fill up my E-tanks, and then it was time to look at armour combinations. I went with the all X-Dive parts, hoping to make use of the special to deal huge damage to the group, but I couldn't really tell what X-Dive did. I felt like I had dealt out some huge damage, and so pushed on, again with a little bit of experimentation with various weapons and their charge attacks. And you know what? Success! I defeated one. At this point, X is locked in place whilst the victory theme plays. Unfortunately, as soon as this ends, as do X's iframes and I was finished off. I don't really know if you're supposed to finish this battle. I believe I was missing 2 of the 4 E-tanks. At least it looks like there is room for them. I'm pretty sure this is just a bit of fun, and there is no reward for actually beating all of them. So at this point I claimed it a victory, I'd won. I'd finished the game. Game over. The essence of these videos is that I give concise critique of the games I played, essentially just to blurt out all the thoughts in my head into a constructive video essay. Although this is a fan project, I will be constructive in my criticisms and also fair in my praise, irrespective of the admiration I have for the wit and determination of an independent developer. With all that said, the things I liked are: sprite work is beautiful, every boss is beautifully rendered in 16-bit glory, This game is an absolute visual treat. Handling is spot on. I never felt that the controls were a hindrance or were any cause of any of my failings. No bugs throughout my entire playthrough. I didn't encounter a single hiccup, which is very impressive. Overall, just a thoroughly impressive and well-made fan game that contains a lot of content. All that's missing that you'd find in any SNES era Mega Man game are the final area stages, effectively about a third of a typical Mega Man game. There is a great deal of content to be had here, and if you've never played X8, the Demake may be the best introduction into it. I've gushed praise for this video, but there are a couple of critiques worth mentioning, the first one being the save system. It's not very clear at all that the game autosaves. You cannot do so manually, and at the main menu there is no continue option, just game start, so you will always have to play the intro stage to resume your game. The second critique is that the boss weaknesses doesn't seem especially important. The buster itself does consistently good damage. I understand implementing new animations for bosses reacting to their weakness would be quite time-consuming addition, but sometimes it appears that damage done isn't too amazing either. The ending is bittersweet, a cruel reminder of how neglected the Mega Man series has become. I know about X-Dive and its subsequent offline version, but this is what fans really want, I think, not some delisted gacha game. We're seeing such a revival of sprite-drawn games, proving that 16-bit graphics weren't just a limitation of old hardware. It's an art form, and the sprites themselves affect the game's mechanics too. Controls are much more snappy and responsive in the sprite game, whereas the contemporary games of today feel more concerned with finishing a mocap animation. I would love to see Capcom embrace the Blue Bomber once more. I'm not greedy, I don't want it to run on the RE engine at 120 frames in 4K. I think the 2D realm is the perfect fit for Mega Man. If the videos of corruption are anything to go by, then Mega Man would be right at home as a Metroidvania type game. Unfortunately, there is no real buzz anymore for Mega Man. Capcom haven't done enough to keep the Blue Bomber relevant, and why would they? They're cleaning up the Resident Evil series, Monster Hunter has an avid and dedicated fanbase, and Street Fighter is enjoying a resurge as the fighting community grows in the age of competitive online gaming. But I'll be keeping the fire going for now. I will endeavour to talk more about Mega Man and the games that made my childhood in future videos, and I hope that if you've never played a Mega Man game, this video or one of the many others out there on YouTube will convince you otherwise and you'll give this series a go. Thanks for listening to this old fool ramble on. As always, it's greatly appreciated. This has been Opinionated.